Sunday, November 25th, 2018, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today I want to talk about Goldman Sachs, central banks, the RBA in particular in Australia, and the Bank of Canada. What about Goldman Sachs? Well, I want to show you how they've got more front than Sainsbury's. That's a saying in the UK that we have for someone who's like shameless. You know, Sainsbury's is a big department store, so if someone has more front than Sainsbury's, it means that the person has no shame. So, and why am I saying this? Well, Goldman Sachs now is trying to portray itself as a friendly bank for the masses. I saw an advert in this week's Economist that I've been subscribing to. Here's the cover, the latest cover. The truth about a no-deal Brexit. But that's not the important part. It's this advert I saw on it, and it says, Marcus by Goldman Sachs, putting interest back into savings. Start saving with just £1, no fees or charges. Move your money whenever you like. Open an online savings account at marcus.co.uk. And it's interesting that the advert shows a cyclist riding, I think it's Regent Street in London, in front of a black cab. And there's a building with a huge front. So maybe they were thinking the same thing I was. Well, we have more front than Sainsbury's. Here's the advert, Marcus by Goldman. So before I go into the central banks, let's dig into the Goldman Sachs story. Of course, many of you who are my age, a bit younger, know what Goldman Sachs represents. I mean, they've got people everywhere in central banks and governments and treasuries for the last 20, 30 years. They're kind of the poster child for the banksters and central banks and the bailouts of '08. What about the name Marcus? Well, I've spoken about this book, Our Crowd, The Great Jewish Families of New York by Stephen Birmingham, right here. So who's Marcus? Well, on page 70 it says here, in the same pivotal year, 27-year-old Marcus Goldman, a more down-to-earth sort, arrived in New York. He was also a Bavarian, born into a small village, Burgpark, near Schweinfurt, and he quickly set off for the area that rightly or wrongly young German Jewish immigrants had heard was the peddler's paradise, the coal hills of Pennsylvania. He was the original Mr. Goldman, Marcus. So they named this, consumer bank that they're offering people to open accounts for £1. They named them after one of the founders, Marcus Goldman, from the mid-1800s. So for those of you who are young, who haven't been around that long, who were not grown up during the '08 crisis, I really recommend you read an article by Matt Taibbi in Rolling Stone magazine. He wrote that almost 10 years ago now, and it's entitled The Great American Bubble Machine. And it says, from tech stocks to high gas prices, Goldman Sachs has engineered every major market manipulation since the Great Depression, and they're about to do it again. And he even called them the great vampire squid, which is something that stuck. So what are the bubbles that Goldman Sachs helped create? Bubble one was during the Great Depression, when they're involved in what was called investment trusts, similar to modern mutual funds. Many people lost all their savings with that. Tech stocks, they talk about the bubble number two. Fast forward about 65 years, Goldman not only survived the crash that wiped out so many of the investors it duped, it went on to become the chief underwriter to the country's wealthiest and most powerful corporations. Bubble three, the housing craze, We all know about that, subprime housing, all the derivatives. I recommend you watch The Big Short for that. Bubble 4, a $4 gallon of gas. I won't go through that too much, but an interesting bubble that they've been involved is rigging the bailout of '08. So this is very interesting. And I'll put, of course, a link below in the description to this article. It says here, after the oil bubble collapsed last fall, this was written in '09, right? There was no new bubble to keep things humming. This time the money seems to be really gone, like worldwide depression gone. So the financial safari has moved elsewhere, and the big game in the hunt has become the only remaining pool of dumb, unguarded capital left to feed upon, taxpayer money. Here in the biggest bailout in history is where Goldman Sachs really started to flex its muscle. It began in September of last year, '08, when the then Treasury Secretary Paulson, former CEO of Goldman Sachs, made a momentous series of decisions. Although he had already engineered a rescue of Bear Stearns a few months before and helped bail out quasi-private lenders Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Paulson elected to let Lehman Brothers, one of Goldman's last real competitors, collapse without intervention. Goldman's superhero status was left intact, says market analyst Eric Saltzman, and an investment banking competitor, Lehman goes away, said Mr. Saltzman. The very next day, Paulson green-lighted a massive $85 billion bailout of AIG, which promptly turned around and repaid $13 billion it owed to Goldman. Thanks to the rescue effort, the bank ended up getting paid in full for its bad bets. By contrast, retired auto workers awaiting the Chrysler bailout will be lucky to receive 50 cents for every dollar they are owed. So, I mean, here we have, the poster child of market manipulation, influence peddling. They're, asking you to put their money with them, to trust them, to put your hard-earned money with them, to earn 1.5% a year. I'm sure Marcus is also, they've set up in the US as well. So do you really want to put your money, lend your money to Goldman Sachs, knowing what they've done in the past? I wouldn't trust them with the barge pole. And the thing about putting your money in the bank these days is that it's an unsecured loan. And you can bet that Goldman Sachs, for every pound or dollar that they take from you in deposit, they're going to lend out many, many times, over that money. And they're going to make a lot more than 1.5% at a very big risk. How can I say, backstopped by, too big to fail rules, BIS. So, I mean, if you want to deal with Goldman Sachs, go ahead. Make 1.5% a year interest, even though the cost of living is probably rising more like 5, 6, or 7% here in the UK. Take your pick, or become self-reliant and independent. Take your money, your hard-earned savings and wealth out of this corrupt system and put it into the money of gentlemen, precious metals, and silver, that is, the money of gentlemen, or the money of kings, gold, physical gold and silver. My UK viewers, you will get a 0.5% discount from goldinvestments.co.uk using promo code MANECO64. People from other parts of the world can contact Gold Investments as well. They ship worldwide. It might not be worth getting it shipped from the UK, but you can always check. So yeah, don't finance Goldman Sachs and the bankers. They're not there to in your own interest. They're there, to screw you. And I highly recommend you read the story. The article written in 2009 by Matt Taibbi. The Great American Bubble Machine, where he talks a bit about the great vampire Squid. And now it's morphing into Marcus. Sounds very nice, doesn't it? Marcus from Goldman Sachs. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. The other thing is about Adams and North. I've spoken about John Adams, about the situation of the Australian gold with the Bank of England. I'll put the 2 videos in the cards above and in the description. So there's a new follow-up video. There's one from the 15th of October. It says, a new gold scandal. England denies Australia access to its gold. Basically, John Adams, through Freedom of Information Act in Australia, has demanded that the RBA, the Central Bank of Australia, Reserve Bank of Australia, show how many times, it's audited its gold at the Bank of England. And basically they replied to him and said, we've only audited it in 2013 once, and the gold's been there for almost 20 years. And we don't know when the next audit is going to be. And the Bank of England is the institution that has to be audited, but they're setting all the conditions for the audit. And Australia is keeping 99% of its 80 tons of gold with the Bank of England. So now they've come up with another video on the 21st of November. It says the people's gold will not be kept among the people. And they actually play a video of Philip Lowe, who's the governor of the RBA. And Philip Lowe is one of those typical PhD economists from Harvard. And he thinks he knows better than the market, right? He thinks that he knows where interest rates should be. He's got this corrupt, bogus Keynesian mindset. And I listened to this video, and they played the video of Philip Lowe. He was at a conference in Australia, and he was speaking. And 2 things that I took from this guy. The first one was about credit, and I'll play to you what he thinks about credit. And it's quite amazing, in my opinion. And the second one is when actually someone asks him about the gold reserves. And I'm not going to say he lied, but, I'll say he lied, because he actually said that Australia had done, has done several audits on its gold, which is not true, because they've only done 1 audit in the last 20 years. The last one was in 2013. And he doesn't answer the question from the reporter who asks, when is the next audit going to be? So I'll first play when he talks about credit, which I found quite interesting. So let me get here.
Concern more is about credit supply. Now, a few years ago, credit standards were way too loose. And there's been a correction of that, but I'm starting to be a bit concerned the pendulum might be swinging a bit too far the other way. We need financial institutions to take risk, and that means lending to some people who actually can't pay the money back.
So there we go. That's what I wanted you to listen. So here's the governor of the Reserve Bank of Australia saying that we need banks to lend money to people that can't pay it back. I mean, if you think these guys are looking after your interest, I mean, you just have to listen to that. I'm sorry. This guy is a muppet, as one would say. And the next one, let's go to the clip, to the part where he talks about the gold reserve. A reporter in the crowd asks him about it. Let me move up to the exact time here, and play you this. This is quite amazing as well.
Given. Governor, this is Anthony Ross from Chartered Accountants Australia, New Zealand. You spoke about building buffers into the system. I'd really love to know about Australia's gold reserves. So when the RBA plans to do another audit on our gold reserves, and with 99.9% of our current gold reserves in the Bank of England, whether the RBA has a plan to bring any of them back to Australia?
No, we don't. We do regular audits of our gold reserves to make sure all there and accounted for, and I can report that every audit is, we get a clean bill of health there. We keep the gold reserves in the London, because that's where the centre of the gold lending market is. We, by able to kind of lend out our gold.
The center of the manipulation by the LBMA and the bullion banks. That's what he should have said.
Gold temporarily, we can earn a small incremental return on it and cover some of the costs of holding those reserves. So I think it's kind of the right place for the gold to be. We don't have any plans to sell anymore, to buy anymore, or to bring it back to Australia.
So that's quite amazing, because if you listen to the previous video from Adams and North, you see that the Bank of the RBA has only audited its gold at the Bank of England once in the last 20 years. And he doesn't even answer the question about when is the next audit going to be. I think, it just goes to show that these people are not very truthful. Unfortunately, that reporter didn't follow up on it and say, look, we've got information here that you haven't done several audits. What's the only way to solve this? Well, Adams and North talk about people going to their representatives in the Houses of Parliament or Houses of Representatives in Australia. That's the only way to try to get this guy fired from the RBA. That's the only way they can do it, through the political avenue. So now I want to talk about the Bank of Canada, because there's an article here from yesterday. It says on Zero Hedge, Bank of Canada to start buying mortgage bonds as Canadian housing market cools. So this is just another example of how deceptive central banks are, because this is the first time the Bank of Canada is going to start buying Canadian mortgage bonds, and they're not calling it QE. They're basically using, the terminology saying that they're trying to manage their balance sheets better. But as this the person who wrote this article, one of the Tyler Durdens from Zero Hedge, said, this is just trying to prepare, for the fact that the housing market in Canada is slowing down, especially Vancouver and Toronto. And at the end of this article, this guy says, and now the Bank of Canada seems to be taking preemptive steps, just in case this localized slowdown spread to all other markets. So yeah, I recommend you read this article, especially my Canadian viewers. I know I got quite a few of those. So let this fool you. The way they came out with this is kind of like harmless. Oh, we're just managing the balance sheet. But this is very important. They say that it's not going to affect policy, but it will, because it will create like a moral hazard. People who buy these, private investors, institutional investors who buy these Canadian mortgage bonds, they're going to see, oh, Bank of Canada is going to maybe start, they're going to start buying this at the end of 2018, beginning of next year. Let's front run them, because they're going to be buying. So that's going to drive the rates lower. So there you go. Goldman Sachs, and Marcus, trying to get your money. Beware. It's up to you if you want to, lend money to Goldman Sachs, the vampire squid. But caveat emptor. RBA, Dr. Philip Lowe, RBA governor, doesn't give a hoot about Australia's gold. He's also not being truthful about the audits, I would say. John Adams is very diplomatic. He doesn't use the L word, which I think he, is justified. I won't use it either, though. And then the Bank of Canada coming out here through the back door with QE for the housing market in Canada. So what's the best way to fight these people? Don't play their game. Try to borrow as little as possible, or not at all, and take your money out of the system. Put it into precious metals. The money of gentlemen and the money of kings, silver and gold. So if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it far and wide, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.